Welcome back to another episode of A Recent Study Suggest. I am your host, Robert, and with me, as always, my co-host,
Sam.
We recorded these so far in advance, we've actually missed our 10th episode. Our 10th episode came out like 2 weeks ago, or maybe 3 weeks ago, from when we're recording now.
That's true.
And I think it was a really good 10th episode.
Honestly, I don't remember which one that was.
It came out the butt.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, when we're recording, it comes out tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
But, like I said, these are recorded so far in advance, we kind of just forget which episode is which when we're recording it.
Right.
I feel like it's one of those episodes that are just like, can really show you what the podcast is about.
It came out the butt.
Yeah. It's just one of those silly studies that really, conversation starters. We always say this is a conversation starter podcast that we look at studies that just make us think. Because a lot of times it's the article headlines, right? That takes a snippet of the study and it's like, what? This study is real?
Yeah, and that's one of the studies that I'm actually glad exists. Like, I felt so much better knowing that I now had this, nugget of information that I wouldn't have otherwise known.
I think it's very valuable information to have.
Yeah, our lives are better. I'm sure your guys' lives are better too, even now, knowing that.
I touched on it a little bit, but what is this podcast about, Sam?
So, we're called A Recent Study Suggests because we look into recent studies that may suggest something a bit strange, or maybe it just gets us talking. So they're just essentially like conversation starters.
And today's episode really is like a conversation starter because it's about text messaging.
Mm-hmm. Or it might be a conversation ender.
Yeah, I guess it could be depending on the way you text. How familiar are you with texting? Do you do text often?
I do. Yeah, I text every day. What about you?
Every day?
Mm-hmm.
Same, every day.
Who are you texting every day?
Huh? That's a little personal. We didn't discuss this beforehand.
Yeah, I've been texting since I had my first cell phone.
How old were you when you got your first cell phone?
I was 11 years old when I got my first cell phone.
You're 11. I was 12, I think.
Okay, so not much after me.
Do you know what your first cell phone was? Do you know what it's called?
No, I don't. But it was one of those thick Nokia phones that it was not a flip phone. It was
just a brick.
Yeah, it was essentially a brick, and it was silver. I remember going to T-Mobile and getting a new case for my phone. And cases back then were not like cases now where it just protects your phone. It was essentially just to give my phone a makeover. It was the exact same plastic case that my Nokia had, just pink.
When I think about cases for those Nokia phones, I think of it was like a leather one that had a plastic screen on it. Mm-hmm. That's what I think. It's like a black leather one.
No, mine was plastic, and it didn't do much for protecting my phone. Every time I drop it, the case would come off. But the phone itself was okay.
Yeah, I was about to say, it's one of those legendary phones that just never broke.
Yeah.
You could never break it no matter how hard you tried.
Yeah. The phone was solid. The case was probably very cheaply made. Mm-hmm. It was kind of sparkly and pink, and I don't know, I just didn't want it to be gray. I had the coolest ringtone, though.
What did you have as a ringtone?
I really liked the Black Eyed Peas. Was it the Black Eyed Peas or was it Fergie? My Humps.
Yeah, ringtones aren't really a thing nowadays, I don't think.
You're right. For the most part, I have my phone on Do Not Disturb, so it makes no noise. It doesn't even vibrate.
I do keep my phone on ringer mode. So my phone does ring. But I think that most people just have the default ringtone set, which is what I have too.
Really? I remember you used to be really into ringtones. It used to be whatever song was your favorite at the time.
Yeah, that was maybe 8 years ago.
Robert's also older than me, if you didn't know, by several years.
I am not older than you.
8, precisely.
Well, my first phone was a Motorola Razr.
You had a cool first phone.
I had a cool first phone, I did. But the thing that I also wanted to bring up was that when we were texting, we had to use T9.
Oh my gosh, Robert, you are so right.
So it was pushing the key several times to get the letter that you wanted.
Oh, but I didn't use T9 that way because I knew that number 1 was A through C and number 2 was D through F or whatever. I had that memorized. So I was fast. I was a fast T9er. You were a puncher? You had to do several punches?
Well, that was a way to text individual letters one at a time. But with T9, if you knew the word that you were spelling out, which I'm sure most of the time you did, it would autocomplete essentially, right? You just start typing one letter at a time.
It was so great. I'm glad you mentioned that because I was so good at T9, and once phones no longer had that option where you could see the whole keyboard, that was quite an adjustment for me. There's just so many buttons to press. And now, obviously, it's easier, but man, I loved T9.
You love T9? Yeah. I don't think anyone would want to go back to T9.
What? Way less buttons you had to press.
But it was slower.
No, for me, it wasn't. Because I didn't do that thing where I had to press the number 1 2 times to get to B. Like, I would just have to press it once.
I'm anti-T9.
Oh, gosh.
But now that we've gone down memory lane a little bit, let's actually get into the study.
Yeah.
And what is the study exactly?
This study is a confirmation that ending your texts with a period is terrible.
Ending text in a period can be seen as passive-aggressive.
You're not just ending your sentence. It's like you're trying to end the conversation, or you're serious and you're angry.
So just, I guess, reading the headline, do you agree? Is ending the text with a period bad?
I think that it just emotes something more serious or concrete, maybe angry. What did you think when you read the title? Did you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agreed. It's just nobody that I know ends the conversation with the period. If it's a one-word text, there's no period, right?
That's true.
I think maybe the only person sometimes is my mom. If she's sending a one-word text, she'll have a period. But that's not all the time.
Periods are only for separating sentences, not for ending the whole text message.
I think if you have multiple sentences in the text, the last sentence doesn't have a period.
Exactly. Yeah, I only ever add a period when I'm upset. Like, it's very intentional. I'm putting a stamp on it. Like, I'm angry, and you need to know it.
So that's what I was saying earlier. Do you think sending a text with a period says something about the sender? Does it make them come off like as mean or something?
It makes them seem more serious. Or maybe they're angry at you.
Right.
You get the point. Like, there's a literal point at the end of the sentence. You get the point.
It does come off a little bit passive-aggressive. But is that something that we just think? We've gotten used to, I guess, sort of not using grammar correctly when we text sometimes.
I guess so. I've always been pretty good about my grammar in text messaging, unless I really want to be silly.
Right, but is it something that we're just perceiving, or is the person, did they mean to be passive-aggressive?
Maybe whoever is sending text messages, like you would be able to pinpoint it pretty easily. Okay, this is a person who always ends their sentence in a period. So it's not them just being serious or angry or mean to me. This is just the way that they text. We have gotten used to texting and not ending our messages in a period. Maybe we just realized how those texts that end in a period make us feel. So maybe it's us, not them.
But now there is a study that confirms it.
That's true. That is what this episode's about. You lose that face-to-face communication. And so we use things like periods and exclamation points and things like that.
Yeah, people that send texts with periods, those come off as less sincere. At least that's what this study came to the conclusion of. Because as you mentioned, there is this face-to-face that we're kind of losing when we're texting. But also texting is pretty quick.
Yep.
So it kind of mimics that face-to-face.
Yeah, the immediacy of conversation.
Right. And so when you put a period to a text, it makes it seem like the conversation is done.
Yeah.
Like as if you were face-to-face. And like you just finish your sentence and now you're done. You're walking away. You're going your separate ways, whatever.
Right.
So when you're texting and you include a period, that's kind of what it just mimics. That face-to-face.
Yeah. And we're not just saying this. Within this study, there were 126 undergraduates, and they compared texting versus handwritten notes. And texting with a sentence that ended with a period made people seem less sincere than when no punctuation was used at all. So what we were talking about before, where it's okay to end your sentence without a period, because that means like you can continue. But the same effect wasn't present when it was handwritten notes. I guess because that seems more formal you're used to seeing handwritten notes or letters with periods. It's not that immediacy of texting. It doesn't mimic face-to-face.
And those kinds of interactions have changed with time. There used to not be a thing as text messaging. It would be handwritten notes, letters, or, just face-to-face.
Or there was like phone calls. People actually talked on the phone.
Oh, yeah, yes, they did. Phone calls. That kind of just... I forget about phone calls. Yeah. But you do have a story of someone you work with who's older than you. And you have like this funny interaction with them.
Yeah, there was a day... So I'm a videographer. I was filming and I was getting some B-roll. And we were having a conversation about her kids and how they're always on the computer. So luckily with this pandemic, not much has changed when it comes to interacting with their friends because they're playing video games and so they're talking that way. And she was talking about how, when she was younger, people were always on the phone. And
that's how they communicated.
Yeah. And I'm just trying to be relatable with her. And I was like, oh yeah, using our minutes.
Our minutes.
And she cracked up laughing and said, oh, I was talking about landlines. And it was I felt so awkward because I was like, we are very different generations.
Right.
My generation was using up our minutes and hers was talking on the landline.
That is something that you just didn't think about.
Yeah.
Did you felt awkward?
I felt a little awkward and like, I'm trying to be
relatable.
Be relatable with her, yeah. And did not go.
Landlines, what are those things?
I don't think we had a landline long in our house. We did have one. But when I was finally communicating with my friends, I was texting and calling. And we had to get like prepaid cards. We had to buy minutes every once in a while. And when they would run out, we'd have to buy another card. So, yeah, we would use up minutes.
I remember buying those prepaid cards, not to talk to anyone here in the United States, but actually for my mom when she would call to Mexico.
Okay, yeah. So you never used minutes to text or to call people with your Razor, your cool Motorola?
Well, we did because that's how we were charged back then. It wasn't just unlimited texting and data.
That's true.
There was hard limits and that you could not go over them because the overage charges would be a lot. And then whoever was paying the bill, in this case, like my mom, she would get really mad. Like, what are you doing? Why are you going over our minutes? This is costing us a lot of money.
Yeah, I remember with the prepaid cards, and I think it was the same with the minutes, and you can see that people are going over. We had to wait until like 9 p.m. to even just text and call freely because then it was free after 9 p.m.
Yeah, there was those plans that had free calling, free texting after 9 p.m. Sometimes some were a little earlier, but most of them were, I think, 9 p.m.
When we started talking, which was in middle school, we used to take advantage of that too. Sometimes we couldn't wait until 9 p.m. So we'd start our call a little bit early, and then we'd end our call, and then call each other back after 9 p.m. Those are the days.
Yeah, we'd call each other maybe like at 7 o'clock, sometimes 8 p.m., then hang up like 8:59, call back like at 9:01. Yep. It couldn't be exactly like at 9, just to make sure we were actually in 9 o'clock. Yeah. But it's because like at the end of the billing cycle, you would get the bill. I don't know if many people get paper bills. I feel like it's paperless nowadays. Yeah. But back then, we would get the physical bill, paper, and it would show each phone number, how many minutes that phone number used, how many text messages that phone number used. And I remember that number being really high, especially when we were talking like in middle school.
Yeah.
I think maybe 3,000 to like 5,000 text messages in that like 28 days.
It's so funny. Yeah, I don't know how often we text now, but I imagine the number is still pretty high. Maybe not as high.
Yeah, I don't think 5,000 text messages.
Yeah, we have jobs. We're adults.
Debatable. But there were these workarounds. Everything is so much easier now.
Yeah.
No more hard caps. No more like finagling when to text, when to call. Things have definitely changed. And it's just us thinking about that wasn't too long ago. And so it just brings me back to the story of who you were working with at that time. You try to be relatable to them, but it's a whole different generation.
Yeah. And even with the way that texting in general is now is different. Like, I remember being very creative with smiley faces. The colon and parentheses. Everybody knows that's a smiley face. Or a colon and a capital D. Or a colon and a P means that I'm sticking my tongue out at you.
You had to create those things because you didn't have that face-to-face conversation. But you wanted to show emotion in text or tone in text, which is just hard to read without that.
I'm so grateful for things like emojis and bitmojis now. It has changed the game.
You couldn't convey that face-to-face, like the tone of voice, your pauses, your facial expression, and so you had to make them in the text. The thing is, I hated them.
I know.
I still hate them.
I remember you, oh my gosh. I remember being upset with you that you wouldn't use a smiley face. So instead, your workaround was instead of typing a colon and a parentheses, which is very simple, you would write smiley face.
I would write smiley face.
I never understood that. There was so much more work on your part. You had to type so many more characters.
Yeah, instead of doing like yes, colon, parentheses, I would say yes. And in parentheses, I would write smiley face.
My goodness.
Sometimes I would write out colon plus parentheses, plus close parentheses.
It's awful.
Because I just didn't like emoticons. I guess what they were called back then. I don't know if we mentioned that. But they were called emoticons back then.
What are they called now?
Emojis, I guess.
Oh.
Yeah, you don't really call them emoticons now.
I guess so, yeah.
But there was a point where I did use them. I did use the colon, close parentheses.
I do remember that.
Just because you bugged me so much about them.
Very short-lived.
And so I was like, fine, I'll do it. I don't like this. I hate it.
You're smiling, but on the inside, you were like...
On the inside, I was unhappy about doing it.
Yeah. You were colon other way facing parentheses.
But it came to a point where I'm like, I'm just not going to do these anymore. And I'm going to see if Sam even notices that I stopped using them. And you never did. So I'm like, sweet, I don't have to use these anymore.
Yeah, well, I did notice. I was just like, clearly he doesn't want to use them. So now you just use a bunch of exclamation points and question marks.
It comes across like I'm yelling at you. Like it's just emotion behind the double question marks or double exclamation points.
I don't ever think you're yelling at me like you're mad, though.
I'm never yelling at you like I'm mad.
If you were mad, you'd be using a period.
When I'm using them, it's usually just like comedic purposes or being fake dramatic.
Yeah, me too. I do it for the same reason. Some of our best conversations, I've screenshotted them sometimes because I think they're funny.
You've actually posted some of the conversations that we have on Facebook.
Have.
You don't even ask me. You just do. I just find out that you post them. And I'm like, what is this?
Well, because they're funny.
You didn't ask me.
They're great.
But now things have evolved past emoticons. We mentioned earlier. Now there's emojis.
Mm-hmm.
So these yellow faces, now there's different colors to them, so it can fill out different races. And there's also Bitmoji, which I think is Snapchat's own thing.
Yeah, I think there's a partnership with Snapchat, but you don't have to have a Snapchat to use Bitmoji.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I don't use them, so I'm not really aware of these.
Oh my gosh, I love Bitmoji because you see how my face would react to things.
There are so many individual situations for Bitmoji.
Yeah.
It seems like every situation.
Yeah.
Because you've texted me just really random ones. And I'm like, I can't believe that there's a Bitmoji for this.
Mm-hmm. So I reached 10,000 followers on a clothing app that I use. And I was so excited about it. So I typed into Bitmoji, I did it. Because I just wanted to see. Because that's what I was going to text you at first. I was going to say, I did it. And send you a screenshot of the number. And so I typed it into Bitmoji. And the only thing that came up was a certification that said, I did it. It said, this certifies that I did it.
Yeah, and it had your Bitmoji face and like one of those like seal of approval kind of things.
Yeah. It's perfect.
And I'm just like, what? How is this a thing? It certifies that you did it. You reached 10,000 followers.
It's so perfect. There's something for pretty much everything, which you don't get when you're just texting words.
And then right after that, I don't know if you remember this, you sent another Bitmoji.
Did I?
You did. And this one was you like in a superhero pose.
Oh, that's right.
Mission accomplished.
Yes. See, it's perfect. And I didn't have to say anything. I just had to send those Bitmojis.
Do you think that kind of takes away from like language though. You're not saying anything, you're showing in a sense. Does that like degrade language in a way? Because there's so many times now where things are shortened. Like words are shortened just to be easier to be typed, easier to be said.
I think that's just how texting has evolved, because with those Bitmojis, it wasn't just a picture. There was also text on it, but I didn't have to text you those words. I didn't have to say this certifies that I did it or mission accomplished, because the picture was saying it for me.
But is this like a cyclical thing? Egyptians use hieroglyphics,
right?
Which essentially pictures to communicate more than one word.
Maybe we're going backwards.
That's what I'm saying. Does this sort of like degrade language?
Now I'm very grateful for emojis and Bitmojis. I think that it just really elevates our conversations.
I think you've made a Bitmoji for me.
I have, yes, because you didn't want to make your own Bitmoji. So the only way I could do it was by transforming me into you. So I had to turn me into a boy and then change like my skin color and my facial structure. And then I sent you a bunch of Bitmojis of you so that we could have like a bank of Robert Bitmojis.
Which I don't use. What I do use are the ones that you sent me.
Yes, you do.
When you send me your own Bitmojis, I'll save them. But when you do something that applies to one of the Bitmojis that you've sent me, I'll send you your own Bitmoji.
That's always so weird.
Pretending that it's me.
You're sending me.
That's just how much I don't want a Bitmoji or like emojis or emoticons. Never have, never will. I think...
I never will! Exclamation point.
I think...
parentheses, smiley face, close parentheses.
I think now there are apps that have their own like animated emojis.
Ooh, oh yeah, you're right. My niece sends me those and they're so weird. She'll like speak into the app and it'll move its mouth, and sometimes she'll send me a message and it's her speaking, but it's not actually her face. It's so weird. I don't know what it is.
I know for sure that it is on Apple devices. I don't know if it's on Google or whatever, but they call them memojis.
Oh.
Right? So it can be yourself and animated and talking, or you can be like a dinosaur or something else.
That's so funny.
And it'll have like your voice.
I feel like that's another one of those like generational gaps, because I didn't know what it was called. I know that she sends me these weird things and I'm just like, that looks like her and it's weird. It's kind of like a Bitmoji, but not.
Is it weird if older people use them?
No.
No, not at all.
No. My mom has Bitmoji.
Well, I mean like memoji.
I think it would be pretty dope if my mom used a memoji.
Because yeah, I know there are some people that think that certain things are more for like the younger generation, and if you use it as an adult, it comes off as weird or something like that. But yeah, I know people that use memojis. People with iPhones.
I feel like now I need an iPhone just so I could send you memojis.
I don't understand why you would need a memoji as opposed to just regular emojis or Bitmoji.
I don't know. It's just funnier. It just elevates conversations. It's just one of those examples of how text messaging has taken on its own like new life.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that I don't understand. I don't get it myself. It makes me sound like a crotchety old man.
I was going to say, that makes you sound old.
Like these kids and their memojis and bitmoj things.
You're even against the colon parentheses. Like, that's where you cap it. Like, everything after that is no.
Yeah, I feel like, was I a crotchety old man at 14 years old?
I guess so. You have an old soul.
I've just gotten older and older as the years have gone by.
Yeah, that's how aging works, Robert.
No, but I mean an even older man.
Mm-hmm. You're like the opposite of Benjamin Button. But that sounds like normal aging. Anyway, back to periods. They suck. And the study just proves that periods no longer are just the correct way to end a sentence. It even goes as far as to say that it's an act of psychological warfare against your friends. I would have to agree with that.
Yeah, because most people don't use a period at the end of a sentence. So when someone does, it's just like, okay, what are they saying? Are they mad?
Are you mad at me?
What did I do? Are you just in a bad mood? Like, did I do something? What's going on here? And so you start overthinking it, overanalyzing it. Yeah. Kind of just get in your own head and start going a little crazy.
I only ever use a period at the end of a sentence when I'm serious or I'm mad.
But those are usually one word text.
Yeah. Oh, you're right.
Right? It's never a sentence and then period.
You're right. The one that's most commonly used to show that you're angry is yeah, period.
Do you think that's the worst one to receive? A yeah period? There's like okay period.
Okay period is pretty bad. But I think the one that I would personally use to show that I'm mad is yeah, period.
But if you received a text that was okay period, would you feel like that's worse than yeah period?
No, I think it would still seem like that person is serious or mad, but yeah, period. There's something about it. It just doesn't say anything really. What do you think is the worst one?
I was thinking okay period. I could see yeah period as just being like yeah. Right? I feel like when you say okay, that's like so definitive because okay in itself is a sentence.
It's so crazy. Like if you said okay with an exclamation point, you'd be so excited. It'd be like, yeah, he's excited about something. And if you said yeah with an exclamation point, like again, you're so excited, but the period, it changes things.
This study actually says that using exclamation points can make your text messages seem more sincere. Because there's a little bit of emotion behind them. But I also don't even like using exclamation points.
But you do.
I use them with you, but most of the time it's for dramatic effect, to be funny. In an actual conversation using exclamation point, I don't ever feel that excited.
That's true. You don't ever yell. You never yell.
I don't yell.
Robert can't yell, guys.
I can't yell. I don't know how to yell. It's a weird thing to say, but I can't yell.
He really can't.
So for work, sometimes there will be, hey, can you do this thing? Thanks! Exclamation point. And I don't want to be like, you're welcome! Exclamation point. Because I don't feel that excitement. I'm just saying, okay, you're welcome. That
I would say no problem! Exclamation point.
To me, with work emails, exclamation points just seem insincere.
Oh.
This study says exclamation points can make your messages seem more sincere.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, to me, it's the opposite. Exclamation point just feels like, oh, I have to include this exclamation point to make it seem like I'm not upset or just make it seem a little
lighthearted.
Happier.
Yeah. Well, because, and one of the things that the study mentions is how you obviously can't use physical or emotional mechanisms when you're texting or when you're typing. And so it makes sense that texters rely on things that are available to them, like emoticons or deliberate misspellings that mimic speech sounds, and punctuation. And punctuation is something that you use in emails because it's not very professional to misspell words in a work email or add a bunch of emoticons, which I do sometimes. I do sometimes use emoticons. But yeah, I like punctuations for work emails.
But I feel so like I'm being forced to use the exclamation point. I just want to say, you're welcome, period.
That's me.
Because there's no excitement. I'm not excitedly telling you, oh, you're welcome, or here's the thing that you wanted. I'm just telling you, here's the thing that you wanted. And so, but I can't do that. I'm always forced to put that exclamation point. Because I think if I don't use it, it will come off as like passive aggressive if I just use a period. So I'm like against my will using exclamation points.
I like exclamation points and I like smiley faces, so I use them even in work emails. But that's because I have that relationship with my coworkers. We like emoticons or emojis.
Yeah, with some of my coworkers, I'll use GIFs, but most of the time, just period is fine. You know? But I think when it comes to text messaging, it's different.
Yeah.
But I did want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier. The intentional misspelling of words to mimic speech sounds. There's this meme that I showed you earlier where it's like, hey, and it's HE with a bunch of Y's.
Yeah.
And in the meme, it tells you, okay, this second Y means this third Y means this fourth Y means this. Because there is that, like, if it was just HEY, that's just, hey, normal person. Maybe the second Y means, hey, like hey, like a little flirty, a little flirtatious.
Like, hey.
Yeah. And I think in the specific meme, there was maybe 4 or 5 Y's, and the last Y was just that person being drunk. I'm using
their finger was stuck on the Y.
Yeah. But do you think that makes sense? That if there's multiple Y's in the hey, maybe it does become a little flirtatious, like a little...
Oh, yeah. Because then you're forced to read it the way that it would sound.
Hey.
And so it almost is like you don't have to add a winky face, but if you chose to, you could have just written HEY with a winky face, but instead you used a bunch of Ys.
And that kind of, it's equivalent to each other in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tend to add extra letters to words for emphasis or to mimic speech sounds. Like, I often do that with the word sweet. I'll put sweet. I do that. I do that with my coworkers too.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, when we share good news with each other and there's something that's really awesome, I'll either say awesome exclamation point or I'll say sweet.
You mentioned earlier too, you use baby.
That's when I'm talking to you though. Baby. I'm instead of BABY, I'll spell BAY dash BE. Mm-hmm. Because I'm not serious. I feel like I can never call you baby.
Right. We don't.
Gross.
We don't call each other those kind of, I don't know, pet names.
Yeah, that one would deserve a throwing up emoji face. But yeah, I'll say baby. And that's the way that I speak to you sometimes too. Like sarcastically, I'll say baby. And it's just fun. And like you can kind of hear my voice without me speaking to you.
I never elongate words, but I do sometimes change the spelling of words to mimic speech. Like I'll change going to gonna.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Or I want to wanna.
Mm-hmm. Or I don't know to I don't know. Don't know.
Yeah, don't know. I don't really do that one, but
like that
the other
one.
two ones I do.
Okay. Yeah, those make sense. And I think that is another way that it sounds like the way that you speak.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes it more conversational, more playful, like you're engaged into the conversation.
Another one that I also do is gotta. Instead of got to.
Yeah.
It's like gotta.
Oh, I say finna.
Oh, finna?
Yeah. Finna leave. Finna go film. FINNA. That one's fun. Which finna is like fixing to, which is not proper English either, but I think it's funny.
To.
Yeah. Like I'm about to.
Mm-hmm. It just goes to show you that language, texting, it's all evolving. Mm-hmm. It all has evolved. Even like in the past 10 years, like we were just talking about, emoticons, T9, and even before then, landlines. You couldn't do the shorthand because you were talking to the person, whether face-to-face or over the phone. And with text messaging, it just changed how we communicate. Mm-hmm. You know, with the words themselves, with emojis, with Bitmoji, Memoji now, all sorts of emojis.
Yeah, so when you're mad at someone, it's super dramatic to, with a landline, put the phone down, or if you have a flip phone, slap the phone closed. And now, to show that you're mad at someone, or if you want to be a jerk, you just end your sentence with a period.
Yeah, even though that's grammatically correct, ending your sentence with a period will kind of have some consequences.
It packs the same punch.
So I guess we can confirm that ending your text message with a period does come off as like passive aggressive.
Yeah.
And speaking of ending things with periods, I think it's about time we end this episode.
Period.
If you guys have studies out there that you want to share with us, you can always email them to us at arecentstudysuggest@gmail.com. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at arecentstudypod. And be sure to rate us 5 stars on wherever you're listening to us from. And share us with a friend.
Yeah, that helps us grow because, as you know, we're a small podcast. And so any little bit helps.
And that's it. Thanks for listening.
Bye.